stick their heads into the sand, and that's obviously a risk for us.
Mark, thank you very much. Senator.
Thank you. I will try to address the questions related to the political or the role of the question of political stability in Europe and how to sustain coalition of willings. First, I think that we have really to be aware of this gap between the experts and the large public. And this gap can be only bridged by very systematic strategic communication tools and methods. And I speak for this country, I know the best. We are still not there. And there is a good or encouraging example that if you are challenging in the parliament, and I speak for the Senate, which is more calm, even in times of campaigning as it is right now, in the Senate you can obtain a very large majority, even on the questions which are difficult, which are challenging, which are not simply to explain. And I think that if you spend time and with your colleagues, you have the time to exchange and to explain, they follow and they are ready to engage. And this is very encouraging. Nevertheless, the gap between, for instance, the high level of intel we have behind closed door and the public information about this is just astonishingly important. And we are suffering from this because the public behaves in a way as if nothing happened. And this is the opposite. And last but not least, concerning the elephant in the room, a question, maybe we should strategize more among allies and engage parliaments very methodically to entertain flow in information and of engagements also on the level of parliaments. Give me just one example. Each time I am with my colleagues from allied countries on the Hill, engaging with members of the US Congress, I can assure you that this is sometimes extremely challenging exercise, but you come back with the very concrete results. And we have to plan each month, almost each week, regardless the midterm or other considerations, how to be there and how to explain, because the number of members of US Congress visiting other continents is simply limited. And so oftentimes it is only a small group of travelers. And I think that we have to make this effort to be there regularly every week. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it is an intriguing idea to suggest that essentially Europeans have to market to the United States the importance of European security. But I think that's very useful to have said from your position in the Senate. Pål Jonson.
Yeah, a few things on intelligence reform as well. I think one of the lessons learned is that it's easier to predict capability than political intentions. We, of course, did an intelligence review conducted by Carl Bildt, which is no stranger to IISS, that was presented in June. I think one of the main conclusions is to work much more with open source intelligence than we actually have been doing before in the intel community, and the importance of fusion also between the political level and in intel community as well. How to sustain the investment in the long run? Well, what we are doing right now is going back to defense investment levels that were apparent during the Cold War, because we have a threat that is equivalent to the Cold War. So in that way, it is natural, of course, that we walk this way, and we've done it before in history. Now, I realize that many European countries are somewhere between a rock and a hard place, because we have low growth and we have high levels of national debt as well. Engaging, like Mark Sedwill said, with your population, I think is absolutely crucial. I'm glad in Sweden we have an all 8 parties stand behind us reaching NATO's capability goal, and also the 3.5 by 2035. So we have a strong domestic support for doing it, but it's easier because we're actually quite low in debt. I think Camille questions, of course, and that's depending on what kind of U.S. posture review we're going to be seeing. I think that's a very important question. If we are, of course, going to be being the foot soldiers, so to speak, or if we're also going to be replacing some of the more advanced capabilities and assets that the Americans have, especially, of course, that goes into the element of nuclear deterrence as well. Now, as the capability targets are shaped, they are, of course, meaning that Europeans will take a larger toll when it comes to the conventional deterrence of the alliance as well. But I think it's a very good question on some of the more difficult things to replace the Americans on strategic lift capabilities, precision strike capabilities, space-based intelligence, and so forth as well. And that's going to take a longer time than just focusing on enablement, which is our predominant focus right now. And that also leads into the question we've been having about mass and scale and volumes. We know what we need to do. We need also to focus on the massing. That is of course a conclusion from the war in Ukraine. And in order to assure mass, we need to break the cost curve especially on a few sectors in the defense industrial base. And then just going back then also to Bastien and also to Ben's question, in regards to the competitiveness of the defense industrial base, there's a lot of things that need to be done. One is because defense industry is victim being the most regulated business on a global basis that costs money because our procurement circles are too long and too ineffective. The other one, of course, that affects it as well is that there's been a lack of long orders as well, ranging over time. So there is a predictability for the defense industry to actually invest into their production capacities. I do welcome more actors into the defense industry because the pie is twice the size, and it's good if we also can get new companies as well with new business models as well that can challenge some of the legacy platform producers, because we need a vibrant and competitive European defense industry market. Those who want to close off that market, I always say if we go for a single EU defense industrial market, it would be bad, expensive, and all have to buy from it. So let's also open up for an element of competition and flow of technology across the Atlantic.
Pål, thank you very much. I wonder whether I might ask you a follow-up question as a NATO defense minister, because everyone on this panel has spoken about capability gaps and the importance of procuring to actually meet defense capabilities. And I wonder whether there needs to be reform, not just at the national level amongst NATO states, but to a degree in the NATO institution itself. I mean, we at the IISS have often found that when, on defense economics, for example, NATO accepts the sort of percentage of GDP, more or less, that is submitted by each country. And our defense economist, former one, Lucy, is here and will report the same, and Fenella spoke about this yesterday. We actually try to do as much as we can a forensic analysis of what actually each country is really spending on defense. And so sometimes the IISS figure, irritatingly for some governments, slightly is different from what the announced NATO figure is. But that dialogue is not as strong as it should be. And the same thing is for defense capability gaps, because NATO asks every NATO member to submit their defense planning questionnaires and state what forces are available for a NATO mission. But is there truly an auditing capacity for that within NATO, in a way at least somehow to enforce a little bit more fulfillment of defense planning questionnaires that might have been submitted but not actually acted upon?
Yeah, I mean, the big challenge we have is to quickly transform economic clouds into combat power, and that in order to have the ability both to fight tonight and to have a longer resilience in the ability that we would conduct such a warfare. And I think that the NDPP process, I think, is quite good in exercising a level of peer pressure on all the allies, and it's all very closely connected to the 3 new defense plans, which I think are vital. So we left this 5 generic plans to go to 3 threat-based plans, and now we know what we need in terms of assets and capabilities to deter. And that's new and it's novel, and the focus now should be make sure that those defense plans, which are drafted by SACEUR, but they are my defense plan and all other defense plans within the alliance, it's our defense plan, and make sure that those are executable. So there's been great progress within the alliance last 24 months, I would say, on the determination of reaching the capability targets. Now, we've been counting how much do the actual capability targets actually cost, and 3.5% is a good start, but they're quite demanding as well.
Thank you. So I'll return to the floor. I've got 3 questions. We'll be able to afford to take 2 or 3 more before returning to the panel and closing at our exact time. Lucie Béraud-Soudreau.
Thank you for the floor. My question is for Minister Jonson. You mentioned that part of the roadmap is to cut down bureaucracy and red tape. And you mentioned the European Commission's proposal for a defense omnibus regulation. But this simplification likely also needs to happen at the domestic level. Could you give examples of what is happening in Sweden also to cut red tape for procurement and to accelerate acquisitions? Thank you.
Thank you. And from Switzerland, Andreas Paparone.
Yes, thank you, John. I remember a time when, like, the Leopard 2 was on the Ukrainian shopping list. And I took the liberty of looking at it, and it's kind of metaphoric for the whole procurement and deployment cycle. The Leopard 2 is a wonderful tank. It has a high survivability. It's a wonderful piece of technology. And then I saw that it takes almost 1 year to make one. Russia now is probably deploying a new tank within several days, even if it's probably an old one. So apart from scaling up masses and breaking down the price, there's obviously some kind of trade-off needed in Western or European defense, in the Western European defense and procurement cycle. Which kind of trade-off would you suggest? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Peter McClear from Bombardier.
Hi, good morning. As stated, I'm Pete Mackler with Bombardier Defense, a Canadian defense industry, the other country on the other side of the Atlantic, and participating in NATO defense and procurement. It strikes me, as the Lord Sedwill pointed out, that the U.S. may, for some reason or another, be focused elsewhere, and Europe will have to cover some of the requirements on its own. And as you look to develop those capabilities, there are obvious surfaces and gaps and capabilities in the European market to meet those requirements, which gives you the opportunity to shape a peculiar European force. How does that look for industry, and what kind of capabilities can this new European defense focus have?
Thank you very much. At present, I don't have anyone else, but yes, I'm about to have someone. Have you pressed your microphone on? Spokesman from the Parliamentary Assembly, now you have. Therefore, your mic is on.
Thank you very much. First of all, to Jonson, välkomna till NATO. It only took 75 years. We're happy to have you. I wonder, and this question kind of goes to the 2 politicians on the panel. So there is a mechanism to engage in parliamentary engagement amongst allies. As Mr. Jonson knows very well, it's called the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, and through it we do engage with MPs across the transatlantic. One of the issues that the NATO Parliamentary Assembly has is that international engagements and travel are being increasingly negatively seen by the domestic audience. This is a big issue in the US, and it's becoming a bigger issue in Europe as well. And I wonder if you could speak to how maybe this interparliamentary diplomacy focus on defense could be better used to engage with our public, and how we could make our publics aware of the fact that we really need the alliance now. And I believe this ties to strategic messaging from MPs like yourselves. Thank you very much.
Perfect. So I'll now return to the panel in the order in which they first spoke, giving each exactly 2.5 minutes because we have to be off the stage in 8 minutes. Pål Jonson.
Okay, very briefly then in regards to omnibus defense, no, what matters is what we're doing on the national level. Here we're coming from a system that was very centralized, where it was make sure that you don't take risk. Now we need to take risk in order to assure growth. That means a much more efficient cooperation between government agencies within the armed forces and between the government and the armed forces as well to unleash that power, which is right now there's a certain taxation related to all the measures and the bureaucracy that we have to it. And something you really need to put management attention, because it won't happen by itself. That's my experience when it comes to trying to cut red tape. That is absolutely critical. Then in regards to parliamentary diplomacy, I think it's very good. I had the honor, of course, to briefly serve also on NATO's Parliamentary Assembly and also to speak to it as well. I think it does a very important job. The kind of security that NATO now provides is more in demand than ever. I think there is a strong public support for increased defense investment, at least in Northern Europe, and there is indeed a very strong support for NATO's and also for our NATO membership. If I say one advice as a defense minister, I'm really the foreign minister of defense policy these days, because we are traveling quite a lot as ministers, and we need to run our department. We need to ensure that budgets is approved and then legislation is adopted. Every semester I have 2 EU meetings, 2 NATO meetings, 2 NODEFCO meetings, 1 JEF meeting. I have Ukraine Defense Contact Group every 6 weeks. I have the Northern Group, and I have the JEF. So I'm spending a lot of time traveling. What matters is what we do at home. So this is a challenge for us. We're a bit overstretched as defense ministers, but I do applaud everything we can do on the parliamentary side also.
And sorry for the IISS imposing on you the Shangri-La Dialogue, the Manama Dialogue, and the Prague Defense Summit as well, Pål. But thank you very much for having committed to all 3 of those. Senator Fischer.
I will take the last question on parliamentarian diplomacy. This is a real challenge because our public opinion is very sharp on our foreign expenditures, and even though you travel really very economically, this is always a pretext for criticism. I think that the way out is to create synergies. So when I was visiting the US Congress last year, each time it was with a group of people from Canada, Germany, UK, France, Italy, Poland, you name it. And I think that it creates a new quality, because this is not a tiny little country visiting US. This is marketing European defense. And I think that this is an approach that we have to take as one of the options. Second, I cannot speak for the Parliamentarian Assembly of NATO as a whole, but I think that it could do better job in our country, because I don't hear my colleagues who are members of this assembly to speak out really regularly about the issues they discuss behind closed door. And last but not least, I think that the government, which is so much exposed, as the minister just highlighted, to international agenda, that there is a real challenge how to explain to the constituency what is now at stake, has to strategize more with parliaments in order that there is a distribution of labor. And I think that there is a gap of synergy, at least in my country. So several ideas, and thank you very much for the challenge.
Thank you very much. Mark Sedwill.
Thank you. Just on this question of communicating with the publics, there is a tendency for us to want to talk to ourselves among essentially the political professional class, conferences like this, parliamentary engagement and so on. And that is clearly critically important, because in the end, we're democracies and our parliamentarians need to engage with the public. But there is also another way of doing it. So I've just participated in a podcast run by the Sky News defence correspondent Deborah Haynes, to try and find a way of sort of popularising some of these issues. And it's a war game. It simulates essentially an attack on the UK by Russia with the United States not engaged and essentially designed to reveal the gaps in our conventional capability and the invidious choices between essentially caving in and having to go all the way to the strategic nuclear deterrent. And he actually brings it out in a way that is more engaging to the public than people like any of us sitting on a late night news program telling everyone how important all of this is. So there are other ways I think we need to think about getting this message into our public mind. Just on the industry question, I mean, the truth is really since the end of the Cold War, we postured our defence procurement for just-in-time delivery for essentially a situation where we were at peace, and we didn't resource the unglamorous business of having surge capacity, being able to ramp up production of munitions, let alone, as we heard from the Swiss colleague, building tanks, etc., faster. And so quite a lot of the 3.5% that Minister Johnson was talking about is going to have to go into the unglamorous business of building more capacity in our industrial base, not necessarily buying new headline fancy systems that people tend to want to announce. It's going to have to be some of that unglamorous stuff. It doesn't mean, by the way, maintaining massive inventories, because, of course, as we know, with the pace of innovation, those would simply be out of date. They wouldn't just rust, they'd be out of date. So we have to take this trick of being able to innovate, being able to have surge capacity, and also being able to discard old technologies and keep moving. And that is a different industrial model. And we obviously need to engage industry in working out how exactly we do that, because I don't think governments have that answer. I don't think industry has that answer entirely on its own either.
Well, Mark, thank you very much. And let me do two things now. First, invite you all to thank our speakers for what was a really extraordinary session. I'm really glad that this session was on the record, and I do hope that we've captured all of your remarks, some of which had to be written semi-extemporaneously. Others had maybe a day more to prepare, but I think this was a really rich discussion and put a lot of things out there that we need to proliferate through our own societies as well, and not amongst the elite who like talking about these issues. So allow me to thank all the speakers.
Thank you.
And the second thing I want to say is to invite Lord Sedwill, Pål Jonson, and Senator Fischer to assume the chairs there, and for all of you to stay in the room, because momentarily the Secretary General of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization will address this conference. Thank you. No, it's super, Mark.